When my husband Mark and my biological sister Chloe threw the divorce papers in my face inside their brand new luxury penthouse, they thought they had completely ruined me. They had spent the last 6 months secretly sleeping together and forged my signature to steal my late mother's multi-million-dollar inheritance. Mark looked into my eyes and said, "Thanks for the money, Elena, but you're outdated. Chloe is my new partner now." They expected me to scream, cry, or beg, but I just smiled, because they didn't know that I had discovered their dirty secret 2 months ago. To launch this massive luxury company, their stolen money wasn't enough, so they secretly took out a massive private loan. What they didn't know is that I used every single penny I had left to secretly buy their entire debt. But that wasn't even the real twist. The real shocker? I found out that my sister Chloe was actually secretly planning to screw Mark over and steal the company from him too. And I was about to let them destroy each other in the most brutal way possible. But to truly understand how my own blood sister and the man I loved for 7 years turned into my worst enemies, we have to go back to where it all began. Exactly 3 months ago, on the day of my mother's funeral. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman of immense grace, quiet dignity, and sharp financial intelligence. She had spent over 40 years carefully building a successful real estate portfolio, brick by brick, acquisition by acquisition. She was an old-school professional who survived economic downturns because she never relied on luck. She always told me, from the time I was a little girl sitting in her home office, that financial independence was a woman's greatest shield in a world that often tries to take advantage of kindness. I took those words to heart, eventually becoming a senior financial analyst and auditor. My younger sister Chloe, however, listened to none of it. Chloe was 10 years younger than me, beautiful in a loud, demanding way, and chronically restless. Growing up, she never understood the concept of working for something. She expected life to hand her everything on a silver platter, just because she walked into a room. She was constantly envious of everything I accomplished. If I got a promotion, she complained that Mother loved me more. If I bought a car, she demanded a more expensive one. When I met Mark, she openly mocked him. At the time, Mark was an ambitious but struggling architect with brilliant ideas, but absolutely no business sense or capital. Chloe called him a loser and told me I was settling for a nobody. But as the years went by, things changed. I poured my heart, my soul, and my personal savings into Mark's career. I spent countless sleepless nights rewriting his business proposals, managing his firm's chaotic accounting, and organizing exclusive networking dinners to connect him with high net worth clients. My mother saw my dedication and decided to help, providing Mark with his first major injection of investment capital to launch his signature architectural firm. Slowly, Mark's name became synonymous with luxury design. He became successful because of my strategic mind and my mother's money. Yet, as the fame grew, Mark began to believe his own press. He forgot the nights I stayed up fixing his tax errors. He forgot who introduced him to the city's elite. He began to think that his sudden wealth, prestige, and power were entirely his own doing, born of his singular genius, and that arrogance made him vulnerable to someone like Chloe. The day my mother passed away, a massive piece of my soul died with her. Her battle with illness had been brief but brutal, and her absence left a freezing void in my life. I was completely blinded by grief, barely functional, trapped in a foggy world of sorrow. The formal reading of the will took place 2 weeks after we laid her to rest. Mother had left her beautiful historic estate, a prime piece of real estate, and a substantial investment fund, totaling over $4 million, directly and exclusively to me. She knew I would protect it. Chloe received a generous but smaller cash sum, which she immediately began to waste. Within 2 months, Chloe had blown through her entire portion on luxury international vacations, designer handbags, expensive champagne parties, and incredibly foolish cryptocurrency investments. She was broke again, and her resentment toward me reached a boiling point. Seeing me utterly broken by my grief, barely able to look at bank statements without crying, Mark stepped in with an air of profound sympathy. He held me in his arms every night, whispering that he was there to protect me. He offered to take full, comprehensive control of managing the newly inherited funds and the property logistics. He claimed he wanted to lift the heavy, exhausting burden off my shoulders so I could focus entirely on my emotional healing, because I loved him deeply. Because we had been together for 7 long years, through thick and thin, I trusted him blindly. I signed the initial asset management authorization papers without reading the fine print, believing with all my heart that my husband was my ultimate safe haven. I had no single clue that I was handing a hungry wolf the keys to my mother's lifetime legacy. Weeks drifted into months, and a strange, freezing distance began to grow in our home. Mark, who used to come home for dinner every evening, started working late into the night. He claimed he was closing a massive secret development deal for a new luxury lifestyle brand that would put his firm on the global map. He was distant, irritable, and constantly glued to his phone. At the exact same time, Chloe suddenly became intensely interested in my daily schedule. She would call me to ask if I was going to be at the office late, or she would frequently visit our house when she knew I was out, under the pretense of organizing Mother's old belongings in the attic. My professional intuition as a financial auditor finally woke up from its grief-induced slumber when I happened to log into my primary inheritance account to pay a property tax fee. I noticed 3 small, unexplained wire transfers out of the account, labeled as consulting fees for an unknown company. When I confront Mark about these transfers that evening, his reaction was immediate and defensive. His face flushed red, and he slammed his glass on the counter, angrily accusing me of micromanaging him, checking up on his business decisions like a suspicious boss, and failing to trust the man who was working 18 hours a day to secure our future. That explosive anger was his first critical mistake. In my line of work, a guilty man always overreacts to a simple question. An innocent man simply shows you the receipt. One rainy Tuesday evening, while Mark was supposedly at a late-night international board meeting, a deep feeling of unease settled in my chest. I went down to our home library, a quiet, dark room filled with the scent of old paper and leather. I was looking for my mother's old personal diary, hoping to read her handwriting and find some comfort. As I pulled the heavy bound book from the top shelf, a thick, sleek black document folder fell out from the gap behind it. It had been intentionally hidden away. I picked it up, turned on the desk lamp, and opened it. Inside were copies of banking transactions, offshore corporate registration files, and legal transfer forms. My breath caught in my throat, and the room seemed to spin. There, on the official stamped paper, was my signature, forged with terrifying perfection. Mark had systematically transferred the entirety of my mother's $4 million investment fund into a newly established offshore entity called Horizon Luxury Group. But the betrayal went much deeper than theft. The legal incorporation documents listed only 2 equal partners and shareholders of Horizon Group, Mark and my biological sister, Chloe. I sat in the dark library for hours, staring at the white sheets of paper under the dim light of the lamp. The 2 people I loved most in the world, the husband I had built from nothing, and the sister I had tried to protect, had stripped me of my mother's legacy, while I was wearing black and mourning her death. My hands shook with a mixture of pure rage and profound sorrow. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run upstairs, pack Mark's things, confront them both, and scream until my lungs failed. But then, as I stared at the glossy desk surface, my mother's voice echoed clearly in my mind. Financial independence is a shield, but patience is a weapon. If I confronted them now with nothing but these papers, Mark's high-priced corporate lawyers would immediately tie up the funds in complicated offshore accounts for years. They would lie, they would stall, and they would hide the cash where I could never touch it. I would become the bitter ex-wife, fighting a losing legal battle. I needed to know the full depth of their scheme before I made a single move. I needed them to think they were completely safe. The next morning, I went to work, as if nothing had happened. I kissed Mark goodbye, ignored the disgust twisting in my stomach, and immediately hired the most ruthless private detective agency in the city, along with a brilliant forensic accountant who specialized in offshore fraud. Within 3 weeks of silent investigation, they uncovered the full, disgusting scale of the plot. Mark and Chloe had been having an active affair for over 6 months. They were meeting regularly in a secret luxury apartment downtown, a place that Mark paid for using the very inheritance money he stole from me. But my forensic accountant discovered something even more fascinating. Mark and Chloe were incredibly greedy, but they were also profoundly foolish and financially reckless. To build their dream penthouse office, hire a high-end PR firm, and launch Horizon Luxury Group as a global brand, the $4 million they stole from me simply wasn't enough. They needed massive financial leverage to look as wealthy as they wanted to be. They had approached a highly aggressive, predatory private equity fund and taken out an additional $5 million high-interest business loan. To secure that massive loan, they had used all the assets of Horizon Group as collateral, including my mother's historic family estate, which they had illegally transferred into the corporate portfolio using more forged documents. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to English Stories Hub. A simple like helps more people discover these stories, and your support inspires us to create new ones. Now, let's continue. As I dug through the private loan agreements that my detective managed to obtain from a contact inside the equity fund, I realized Mark and Chloe had signed a dangerous, highly restrictive contract in their rush to get the cash. The loan had a strict material default clause. If the borrowing company missed a single quarterly reporting deadline, if any financial irregularity or fraudulent statement was discovered in their initial application, or if their corporate structure destabilized, the lender had the absolute legal right to declare an immediate default. This allowed the lender to demand the full repayment of the $5 million within 24 hours, or immediately seize all corporate assets and collateral without going through a lengthy court process. This was the golden opportunity I needed. I quietly began liquidating my personal stock options, took out a quiet, substantial loan against my own successful financial firm, and approached the managing directors of the private equity fund. To a massive investment fund, a debt package is just numbers on a spreadsheet, a risk to be managed. I offered to buy Mark and Chloe's entire $5 million debt package from them, paying a premium to ensure a fast, confidential transfer of ownership. Within 48 hours, the legal paperwork was finalized in a closed room. I was no longer just Mark's unsuspecting, grieving wife. I was officially his company's largest, most dangerous creditor. They owed $5 million directly to me, and they didn't have a single clue. But then came the second twist. the one that made me realize just how truly toxic and rotten my family structure was. My private detective intercepted a series of encrypted emails and messages between Chloe and a rival international design firm. My own sister was planning a double betrayal. She had secretly hired an independent lawyer to prepare a secondary set of corporate bylaws for Horizon Luxury Group. Her plan was to use a clause about creative control to legally strip Mark of his voting rights the moment their company officially launched, intending to kick him out of the empire entirely, take the stolen millions, and run the luxury brand with her new business lovers. They were a nest of vipers, completely ready to tear each other apart for a taste of wealth and vanity. They deserved each other, and I decided to give them the perfect, most dramatic stage for their mutual destruction. I waited with absolute patience for 2 more weeks, acting like the quiet, supportive wife at home, watching them whisper and smile whenever they thought I wasn't looking. Finally, the day of their grand corporate launch arrived. They had rented a magnificent penthouse office overlooking the entire glowing city skyline to celebrate their new life. When I walked into the room, dressed in an elegant, sharp black dress, Mark and Chloe were sitting together at a massive, glossy, dark glass table, sipping expensive champagne. The air in the penthouse was thick with their smug arrogance, a celebration of their successful theft. Mark didn't even hesitate or show a shred of remorse. He immediately slid a thick white envelope across the glossy glass table toward me. "Sign it, Elena," he said, his voice cold, devoid of any of the love he had pretended to have for 7 years. "It's over. Chloe and I are building a global empire, and you simply don't belong in this world anymore. We're taking the company, the house, and the inheritance. You leave with nothing. Don't make a scene. Just sign the papers and walk away." Chloe looked at me with a triumphant, wicked smirk, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of finally taking everything her older sister owned. She was waiting for me to break down, to cry, to scream in pain. I slowly sat down, picked up the expensive fountain pen on the table, and signed the divorce papers without a single tear, my hand perfectly steady. Then I looked up, looked directly into Mark's eyes, and then into my sister's eyes. I smiled. "Thank you, Mark. You are absolutely right. I don't belong in your world anymore, because as of exactly 9 o'clock this morning, I own yours." Mark laughed, a loud, mocking, ugly sound that echoed in the empty luxury room. "What on earth are you talking about? You're broke, Elena. We took everything. You have nothing left but your job." I opened my designer bag, slowly pulled out the certified debt acquisition papers, the official default notices, and a comprehensive forensic audit report stamped by the authorities. I placed them firmly on the glossy glass table, right over their divorce documents. "You stole $4 million from my mother's fund, but you borrowed $5 million from an equity fund to build this little playground. I bought that debt package, Mark. I am your lender, and according to Section 4 of your own signed contract, because you submitted fraudulent asset statements and used my forged signature to secure the loan, your company is in immediate, non-curable, material default." The color completely drained from Mark's face in a matter of seconds. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He grabbed the papers, his hands trembling violently as his eyes raced across the legal stamps, the transfer signatures, and the official bank seals. Chloe stood up from her chair, knocking her champagne glass slightly, shouting, "This is impossible. This is a lie. You're bluffing, Elena. You don't have that kind of money." "I don't lie about compound interest and default clauses, sister," I replied, my voice dropping to a calm, icy whisper that filled the room. "You Have exactly 2 hours to produce $5 million in cash to pay me back in full. If you cannot, Horizon Luxury Group, this penthouse office, your corporate accounts, your luxury cars, and our mother's historic estate legally revert to me under the immediate seizure clause. Right now, you are standing on my property." Chloe immediately turned on Mark, her voice turning shrill and panicked, all her elegant composure vanishing. "Mark, do something. Fix this right now. You told me she was stupid. You told me she was too busy crying over Mother to notice anything. You said we were safe." Mark glared up at her, his teeth gritted, his anger boiling over as the reality of his total financial ruin set in. "Me? You're the one who pushed me to rush the loan application. You're the one who demanded we lease this ridiculously expensive penthouse before we even had a client. This was your idea." "Oh, speaking of your beautiful loyalty to each other," I interrupted smoothly, sliding the secondary folder of intercepted emails and hidden corporate bylaws across the table toward Mark. "Mark, before you defend your business partner too much, you might want to look at Chloe's secret contract with the Vanguard Group. Your beautiful muse Chloe was planning to legally lock you out of the company next Monday, strip you of your design rights, and leave you with 100% of the financial liability while she ran off with the profits. She was stealing from you, Mark, just like you stole from me. You see, treachery runs in her veins." Mark stared at the intercepted messages, his eyes widening as he read Chloe's exact words, calling him an idiot architect who was easily manipulated. He looked up at Chloe, his face twisted with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You miserable, backstabbing snake. I ruined my life, my marriage, and my reputation for you. You were robbing me the entire time. You ruined it because you're a greedy, pathetic thief, Mark," Chloe screamed back, her face red, completely losing her mind as she threw her champagne glass directly against the wall, where it shattered into 1,000 glittering, useless pieces. "You're the one who forged the signatures. You're the one going to jail, not me." They began screaming at each other right there in the center of their beautiful, expensive office, trading vicious insults, exposing each other's deepest lies, and completely tearing apart whatever bond they thought they had. Their grand, stolen empire had crumbled into ash before it even had a chance to begin. I sat there quietly, watching them destroy each other, feeling nothing but a deep sense of clean, absolute justice. 2 hours later, precisely on time, the police officers and my private legal team walked through the penthouse doors. Because Mark and Chloe could not produce a single dollar of the $5 million they owed, my lawyers executed the immediate legal seizure of all corporate assets. Furthermore, the undeniable forensic evidence of the forged signatures and the stolen inheritance funds was handed directly to the detectives. Mark was escorted out of the luxury penthouse in handcuffs, his head bowed, facing imminent charges of grand larceny, bank fraud, and corporate embezzlement. Chloe was left standing on the wet sidewalk outside the building, completely broke, utterly disgraced, her name ruined in the business world, and completely abandoned by all the shallow, wealthy friends she had tried so hard to impress with her stolen wealth. I walked over to the massive panoramic window of my new penthouse office. The city below was glowing brilliantly with thousands of golden, orange, and amber lights, beautiful, vibrant, and full of endless life. I looked down at my mother's old diary resting safely on the glossy glass table under the neon light. The legacy she had spent her life building was finally safe, returned to the hands that would respect it. The justice she believed in had been served, cold, calculated, and absolute. I had lost a husband and I had lost a sister, But as I looked out over the glowing city, I knew I had reclaimed my dignity, my inheritance, and my absolute peace of mind. Karma doesn't need to shout, and it doesn't need to use violence. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the room, waiting for the perfect moment to collect the debt in full. Thank you for spending your time with us. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and let us know what you thought. We'd also love to hear what kind of stories you'd like to listen to next. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to English Stories Hub. A new story is coming soon, and we can't wait to share it with you. Thank you for your support, your comments, and for being part of our community. Until next time, take care and keep the stories alive.